Hi guys, my name is Kim. I wanted today to share on this theme of redemptive heritage, and I want to talk about the parable of the prodigal son. So most of you already know the story. It's almost become like an old cliche, but the reason why it has is because it's very powerful. So before Jesus gave the parable of the prodigal son, he had given two parables before that, and this one was just to drive it home. He had given the parable of how the shepherd leaves the 99 and goes to find the one sheep, the one lost sheep, and also how the lady who had 10 coins lost one coin, and then she swept the house and turned everything upside down just to find that one coin. So Jesus was having conversation with the Pharisees. He was hanging around with the tax collectors and the sinners, and the Pharisees pointed out that he was doing this, and so he used the parable of the prodigal son to illustrate his point. And so, I just wanted to look at the perspective of both the prodigal son and the perspective of his older brother. So the prodigal son was he was from a very wealthy family. He had a very wealthy father. And at some point, he decided to take up his inheritance and decided to go live his own life. So that's like most of us Christians who, after some time, we get comfortable or we get, maybe proud or cocky, whatever it may be. And, we're like, look at me now, I'm the man, and we go, we leave the presence of God and we go to follow our own desires and to fulfill our own desires. So it says, the younger son said to the father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided the property between them. So not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and squandered all his wealth in wild living. So already when you leave God's presence, you squander, eventually it will catch up to you, and you can't sustain that life without God forever. You're outside his will. And so after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of the country who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. Then eventually he came to his senses, and he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you.'" So for most of us, we think when we screw up or we mess up, eventually we come to the point where we have to ask God for forgiveness. And at times we normally think that God is just out here waiting for us to fail. But there's this verse in Psalm 32, verse 3. It says, "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer." So this is at a point where David had also, David also had a few screw-ups of his own, and he was, feeling guilt, and his conscience was really disturbing him. And to me, that's really God's spirit being upon us. God doesn't want to just let us go. He cares for us. And so when we step out of his will, the fact that we feel that guilty conscience and we feel that urge to come back to him is because he actually cares about us. He actually wants to bring us back. So going back to the parable of the prodigal son, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. So God is normally waiting for us. At times we think God is just there waiting, for us to mess up, and then he tells us, "I told you so." But this whole time where you have this guilty conscience, and God's hand is upon your heart, and you feel like the need to return to him, especially after being within his presence, God is actually there waiting for you to come back to him. And once we come back to him, it says, the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast to celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. So once we come back to God's fold, he covers us, he covers our shame. And this son's status was restored. He was he was still always his father's son, but once he came back to God's fold, he was actually living in the way that he should. So, most of us Christians, when we go our own way and we decide to do our own things after, being in God's presence, when we come back, God, all these good things God has in store for us, we're able to, claim them. And so now, the older brother was outside, and he heard there was a party. So the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. So this is now, I draw a parallel to the older son as being those Christians who, have been faithful to God. They've always been, serving faithfully, always being in the church. There's examples all around, watukaa kina Dikonjoro, watukaa kina Maxi, people who, faithful people who've been serving in the church. And the father came out and pleaded with him to go into the house. So sometimes we might be in that situation where we're being faithful, serving God, but we can't see what's in front of us. We can't see the inheritance that God has given us. The father came out and literally pleaded with his son and told him, everything I have is yours. So in the very same way, those of you who are in the faith of Christ and you've been faithful, God has put all these things together for you. In Ephesians chapter 1, basically the whole chapter, it talks about us being blessed, chosen, adopted, accepted, redeemed, and forgiven. So if you're feeling God isn't really giving you a lot, it says basically everything you have is yours. So if it says you're blessed, then that means you need to claim your blessings, enter the throne of God with confidence, and claim your blessing. You need to know that you're accepted, you've been justified, you don't need anyone's approval. So this is basically the inheritance that God has for us, that we are blessed, we're chosen, adopted, received, redeemed, and forgiven. So, if you've been away from God's presence, this is your inheritance. If you've been within God's presence, this is also your inheritance. And if, you don't know God personally, this can also be your inheritance. So thank you. I hope you have a good week, and God bless you.